The CIA was beginning to realize that these stay-behind operations were of no significance, except that they served as a network to keep strong anti-communist people together and to keep them motivated. It was almost like a club, a fraternal organization.
In 1965, the creme de la creme of the Italian right and the Secret Services met in a luxury hotel in Rome. This meeting of what was known as the Istituto Polio would radically alter Italian society.
It wasn't just far-right extremists there, but also political scientists, researchers of Revolutionary War, and officials of the Chiefs of Staff. So there were many who believed that you needed to take preventative action against communism with all means available.
At Istituto Polio, the head of the army and the military secret services said very clearly what they wanted to do. They spoke of the fourth dimension of war. After the first phase of the ground war, the second phase of the Navy, the third phase of the Air Force, the fourth phase is the phase that deals with the conquest of the hearts and minds of the population. This is the war that was fought, and is still fought today, by means of low-intensity conflicts, even by means of what we define as terrorism.
Many different groups took an active role in this fourth phase of the fight against communism. Among them was the Italian stay-behind network Gladio, parts of which now became directly involved in domestic political subversion.
Of course, the individual militant or soldier from Gladio didn't know exactly who was above them in the hierarchy. But we know that the bosses of Gladio were in contact with those of the secret services, and this makes us think that perhaps there was this higher direction.
After the Polio meeting in Rome, Italy was hit by a series of bombings. At first they caused only material damage, but with the Piazza Fontana massacre in 1969, one of the darkest periods of Italian history began. Some historians now believe it formed part of a semi-official secret project known as the Strategy of Tension.
The strategy of tension was a complex phenomenon in which the various figures operating didn't have the same objectives. There were groups from the extreme right who really wanted to destroy the democratic system with a coup. Alongside them were military commanders, parts of the secret services, and conservative forces in general, who were using this first group. Rather than a full-blown coup, they wanted a stabilization of the institutions of power.
Destabilize the public order, to stabilize the political order, and justify a repressive intervention that would be welcomed with relief by the population. People want to live in peace. They don't want to walk into a bank or get on a train and die because of a bomb put there by some unknown killer.
In Belgium, Police Commissioner Eddie Vos has come to a similar conclusion. He suspects the Brabant attacks were designed to create widespread fear.
Here in Belgium we had soldiers in nearly all the car parks of the big supermarkets. We had to do our shopping with 2 snipers on the roof. We were extremely frightened. And that fits into this strategy, which was an important element of terrorism.
Belgium was scared. Once fear has been instilled in a population, you can make them do anything.
The Brabant killings in the 1980s took place at a time of political unrest in Belgium. Tens of thousands of demonstrators had taken to the streets to protest against US plans to station new nuclear rockets on Belgian soil.
It was a very troubled period in Belgium. We had hundreds of thousands of people on the streets demonstrating against the installation of missiles, and not everyone was happy with that.
People realized that Belgium was the slack belly of NATO, and we had to prove to the American big brother that we were serious. The Brabant killings finished because their mission was accomplished. The emotional shock was enough to enable the Belgian state to shake off its lethargy and strengthen itself. That's it.
In Germany, the Oktoberfest bomb also exploded at a crucial moment. The governing Social Democrat Chancellor, Helmut Schmidt, was perceived by some as being too weak to handle the left-wing terrorism of the Red Army faction and the growing anti-nuclear movement. According to press reports, elements in the Secret Service were determined to bring hardliner Franz Josef Strauss to power. Investigators suspect that elements within stay-behind and far-right organizations use the strategy of tension to break the left and encourage a population cowed by terrorism to keep reliable centrist governments in power, but not in Britain.
The Security Service in the United Kingdom is an independent organization and cannot participate in partisan politics. There are plenty of people who've worked in the security service on the left, and I would imagine that any participation on the right has been purely in terms of penetrating political organizations. The security service had no brief, and as far as I know, never sabotaged political organizations.
The interference of foreign secret services in European politics is hard to prove, but there is some evidence from the Piazza Fontana inquiry.
Perhaps the most interesting discovery we made during the investigation was the relationship between the cells of Ordine Nuovo, the extreme right-wing group from Veneto, and the American bases situated in that region.
I visited our station in Rome in September, October '69, and the chief of station told me that he was having some problems with naval intelligence, which wanted to run some operations in Italy, some clandestine operations, and he seemed annoyed. And he said, I told him, I don't care if they run any operations, just as long as they don't interfere with any of CIA's work.
While investigating the Piazza Fontana bombing, prosecutor Guido Salvini established the involvement of Carlo Di Giglio, a terrorist with the far-right paramilitary organization Ordine Nuovo, and an informant for US naval intelligence.
Carlo Di Giglio was a militant for Ordine Nuovo. He dealt with the logistics side of things. He was a weapons expert and a central figure. He regularly visited US bases, such as the one in Verona. He was inserted by the US into their informers network. He kept